In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up this week, the issue of the fenced-off area of Varosha is still very much in the news as President Tayip Erdogan of Turkey makes plans to visit the island and, he says, have a picnic on the beach there.
The beachfront has opened. Now, who owns the beachfront? That's the existentialist question. And the answer, of course, is no one, because the beachfront always belongs to the government. The beachfront is the distance between a plot and the water, and that in Famagusta is sand. So who owns the sand? The answer is the government.
And the movement on the island to end corruption in public servants continues apace.
They are under scrutiny now by citizens because we believe that corruption is so big and they are disappointing us because they are involved in the corruption. They use their public position to make money, them or their families.
This story that's been very much on our front pages and in the analysis columns of the newspapers recently is the opening of the beachfront at Varosha in the Famagusta area. It's raised a lot of hackles and we've had demonstrations, a lot of anger on both the Greek and the Turkish Cypriot side because it goes against 2 UN resolutions. So what is the actual picture of Famagusta? Has the law been broken? We're joined by Achilleas Dimitriadis, Nicosia lawyer who's been dealing for many, many years with issues to do with the occupied areas.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think there are certainly political implications. There are emotional implications because people like myself have seen the city opening up and we haven't seen it for 46 years, so it's extremely emotional. But we'll have a go at the legal analysis because that's what perhaps we can try and explain. Let us highlight the importance of Famagusta has always been the beacon, the lighthouse for people to get the course towards a solution. The confidence-building measures that have always been promised in order to kick off the process for solving the Cyprus problem always involved Famagusta as the first step. And I think losing that first step is what has made people angry and has made people lose their patience and hope. So legally, what's the difference between Famagusta, the fenced-up area, that is Varosha, and the rest of the occupied areas? The difference is that there is military control, nobody is allowed in, but more importantly, there are 2 resolutions of the United Nations Security Council, Resolution 550, which says that the inhabitants should be allowed to return under UN control, and Resolution 789, which essentially says that the UN should take over the control of Varosha as part of the buffer zone. Now, the latest thing is that the Turkish government has opened up the beachfront, and there was a very interesting statement by both President Erdogan and Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu that the property rights of the inhabitants are being respected. And I think that if the President and the Foreign Minister of Turkey take the time to refer to property rights, they must have had legal advice. So property rights is something important. The beachfront has opened. Now, who owns the beachfront? That's the existentialist question. And the answer, of course, is no one, because the beachfront always belongs to the government. The beachfront is the distance between a plot and the water, and that in Famagusta is sand. So who owns the sand? The answer is the government. Well, did anybody live on the sand in 1974? Of course not. Everybody lived in houses. So the Turkish argument is, since there are no inhabitants on the sand, since the Cyprus government owns the land, then there are no individual property rights infringed. Well, that technically may be correct, but the biggest question is, what has Turkey done by opening up the beachfronts and roads? And the answer is, it has changed the status quo. The United Nations force in Cyprus, UNFICYP, is here to preserve the peace. You preserve the peace by keeping the status quo as it is. And the Turkish government, by opening up Famagusta, they may allege that there were no property rights infringed, but as a matter of fact, they have changed the status of Varosha in that now people are allowed in, whereas before they were not. So they've allowed people in what should have been the buffer zone. I mean, can you imagine people strolling into the old airport in Nicosia just to have a look around? Because that's what's happened. That's how the buffer zone has been infringed. So that is an angle that is important. The president of the Security Council issued a statement asking the Turks to reverse it. But I think the point here, politics aside, is to really have a look as to what is the meaning of this movement in opening up Varosha at this level, and what's going to come next. Are they going to open up the rest of Varosha? Are the inhabitants going to make a claim to the Movable Property Commission and return to Varosha? And if they do return to Varosha, will they do so under Turkish control? Will we have people returning under Turkish control? These are very hard issues that people will have to decide upon unless there is a solution to the Cyprus problem, unless we sit down for a bizonal, bicommunal federation on the 6 points that Secretary General Guterres has given to the parties. So if in the next few months we do not have a resumption of the negotiations with a view of a solution, I will not be surprised that the Turkish side will open up more parts of Varosha, and people may decide to go back under Turkish Cypriot control, or they may not decide to do so. So it will be very interesting to see how all this develops.
You mentioned that it's a military area, but is that the only reason that Famagusta seems to be considered a completely separate issue from the whole of the occupied areas? Because the Turkish military is all over the north.
Well, the Turkish military is all over, but the normal Turkish argument before the court in Strasbourg is that we, the Turkish government, are not in control here. We have set up the so-called Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. They are a state because we recognize them, and they should be responsible for it. And that has been the Turkish argument up to now. This argument is simply non-existent in Famagusta, A, because the Turkish military actually control the area and there is no civil administration. And secondly, you have the 2 UN resolutions that we've discussed, which define that area as part of the buffer zone, and the Turkish government should do nothing to upset the status of the buffer zone. So I think that's the difference, perhaps, that one can highlight. First, that the Turkish army is in control itself, and the UN resolutions which distinguish it from the rest of the occupied area.
Nicosia lawyer Achilleas Dimitriadis taking the raps for us off the ongoing issue of the fenced-off area of Varosha in Famagusta, and of course that all-important question as to whether or not some sort of negotiation could be used to try and bring an end to this thorny problem.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
Following the trend of much of the rest of Europe and indeed the world, Cyprus has seen spikes in coronavirus cases in recent days, the biggest of which came earlier this week when 92 people tested positive at a slaughterhouse in Kadomoni in the Nicosia district. And that brought forth serious allegations by Green Party MP Yorgos Peridikis, who at a meeting to discuss the Health Ministry's budget said that the accommodation provided for the workers at the slaughterhouse was unacceptable. He said staff were sleeping in overcrowded containers and that some of them were travelling across Cyprus to deliver meat, which of course raised concerns over the spread of infections. He went on to say that the owner of the slaughterhouse has connections that Peridikis said allowed him to get away with illegal acts. He was referring to alleged illegal infrastructures at the slaughterhouse, a case that has apparently been pending in court since 2014. Well, the health minister promised that he would look into those allegations, especially the health and safety of the workers at the slaughterhouse. Meanwhile, the whole island waited with bated breath to see whether a full lockdown would be imposed on everyone, or whether they would stick with the tiered system and curtail travel between the hotspots of Limassol and Paphos. And on Wednesday night, the relevant announcements were made. It seems that Paphos and Limassol are out of bounds to the rest of the island, although that's raised a lot of questions for people in essential services, and the authorities promised to clarify things on Thursday evening. The lockdown includes a ban on public gatherings, but outdoor sports are permitted as long as there are no more than 2 people together. Another measure that's been put in place is banning visits to hospitals and care homes. Restaurants, bars and cafes will only be allowed to operate on a takeaway and delivery basis, and gyms will also be told to close. Public transport will only be allowed to carry 50% of the maximum persons allowed, and large shopping areas like malls will also be closed, the exception being food shops. Beauty parlours, barbers and tattoo shops are also to close, and all of this will carry on until the end of November. The rest of the island, that's Nicosia, Larnaca and Famagusta districts, the picture is pretty much the same as it has been until now, but that too may change if spikes in cases continue to rise.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Well, corruption has been very much on our front pages, on our streets and pretty well everywhere in Cyprus since the Al Jazeera video was aired that politically exposed people to high levels of corruption. It's something we've covered many times on the programme before, and we're going to stick with it this week, because for the last several weeks there have been demonstrations in the centre of town, outside the presidential palace, outside the parliament. People are angry. And a new platform entitled End Corruption has also been very vocal. It's the brainchild of Alexandra Atalidis, who joins us now. Alexandra, can you just, for people who haven't followed this, there can't be many in Cyprus who aren't aware of it, but this, of course, is an online podcast, so there are people in other parts of the world that perhaps don't really understand what's going on in Cyprus. And just tell us a little bit about the extent to which it seems corruption is endemic in Cyprus.
I think it's endemic in every aspect of public life, unfortunately for us. I think it's very widely spread, and in my opinion, it undermines democracy. But let's start with a correction. The platform is the result of the concerted actions of some people that after the first demonstrations, we thought that we have to join forces and come together, so we are around 11 organizations of the same platform. Personally, after seeing the video of Al Jazeera, I had a terrible night. I didn't sleep at all. I felt really knocked out by what I saw. And the next morning when I saw that nobody resigned, I decided to organize the first demonstration, and this is what I did outside the House of Parliament. The next day, 3 organizations joined forces together, and we organized a big demonstration outside where the House of Parliament now is housed because of coronavirus. And then we proceeded with organizing ourselves better. We saw a lot of demonstrations. The last one took place on Friday, and the reason we demonstrate is because we think that the state and the government, instead of addressing the issue with severe measures, they are trying to manage the public opinion, and they are trying once again to hush the scandal. And this is something that we promise that we are not going to accept. And not only we are going to demonstrate, but we are going to bring charges. We are going to send letters to international organizations, because we want the government to be checked. We want everybody who was involved in this scandal to be brought to criminal charges against those that they use their public position for their own profits. This is undermining democracy, and we believe that actually rule of law suffers a lot in Cyprus.
Well, we said at the beginning that it's endemic. It's not just the rule of law in terms of politically exposed persons. Let's talk a bit, if we may, about the civil service, the whole way it's run and the different departments, and the fact that seniority seems to be the way that we like to do things. So the longer you sit in your chair, the higher up the ladder you go. And of course, over the many years that you're there, you're able to make the contacts you need if you fancy doing a little bit of corruption.
I totally agree. I've been a sort of semi-public organization employee, and I saw the system from the inside. It's a system that promotes people who are very well connected with the current government or the future government, and it doesn't mean that they are the best or they can manage an organization in the proper way for the benefit of the public. And this, in the end, demoralizes everybody. Everybody is seeking to advance their careers. Not everybody. Let's not be totally dismissive, because there are people who work very hard in the public service. But what happens is that, and we saw it now, there were people involved in the issuing of these golden passports. What did they do? There are directors, there are general directors of the ministries, there are people who work every day and who stamp them. Nobody said anything up to now. So, in reality, they followed the orders of their political masters, and they did not do that. No. Civil servants, they have to know what is the law, and they have to abide by the law, and if they think that something is against the law, they have to have the courage to say it. But
well, can I just interrupt there, Alexandra, because that brings us on to the whole issue of whistleblowers and protection for people who do spill the beans. We don't have that here either, do we?
Exactly. And as you know, last year there was legislation and there was a resolution by the European Parliament calling upon the member states, the member states, to establish ways to protect whistleblowers. And of course, it gives the whistleblowers a way out. If they think that they are not protected in their country, they can report what they see in other organizations. So I believe that the reaction of the Ministry of Interior, when they saw the video, to start to hunt a witch hunt, who gave this information to Al Jazeera, I think this is totally wrong. It goes against European values. It goes against the rule of law. They should check if the facts were correct and punish the people who were bringing criminals to Cyprus and to wash them out with golden passports by receiving money in their own pocket, instead of hunting the people who maybe, I don't know if they were, maybe gave information to Al Jazeera. These people really in a situation like Cyprus, they are heroes, because they take a big chance on their career and on their lives when they do that. So I believe, and we are pressing as a platform for the swift approval of the legislation for whistleblowers. We demand the approval for lobbyists, because the lobbyists, because they represent big interests, they can do whatever they want, they move around, they talk to politicians. This is kept secret from the public, and then we have these decisions that, in our opinion, are against the public interest. And we want this to be regulated. We want politicians and members of the parliament, when they have contacts with lobbyists, to record them. We want this open to the public and particularly to the media, because we want the media to be able to investigate corruption, and we cannot investigate corruption because nothing is public. And we really condemn the stand of the Minister of Interior, that he doesn't release information about all the thousands of cases of passports. There is no transparency, and this is when there is no transparency, there is no democracy. There is no democracy. But going back to the public service, I think that the unions of the public servants, they should really consider how to empower their own members to stand up against corrupt politicians, because because it's about time they do that. I saw a lot of things when I was working for the Cyprus Tourism Organization, in the sense that there were decisions changing according to the power of politicians, and this is not the correct way for a democratic country.
Right, but you talk about enacting legislation to protect whistleblowers, to make things more transparent. The problem surely is that we all know that some members of our parliament are probably on the lists that haven't been released. There is no clarity at all when they're supposed to declare their earnings and their assets and so on. It's all a jumble, and it's the old thing that turkeys don't vote for Christmas, isn't it?
I will tell you something, Rosie. The political establishment of Cyprus, both the elected parliamentarians, but also ministers, the president and everybody, they are under scrutiny now by citizens, because we believe that corruption is so big, and they are disappointing us because they are involved in the corruption. They use their public position to make money, them or their families, their connected people, and they are actually undermining democracy in Cyprus. They are undermining the trust of the people in the political establishment and the political parties, and they have to do something very fast. Otherwise, we are going to have a big problem in Cyprus. Already we have a big problem of people turning their backs to the political process and the democratic process. They don't vote. The majority of the people don't vote anymore. This is very, very bad for democracy. And Cyprus has lost all the political capital it has gained over the years because of this scandal. And Cyprus is facing big challenges in the Cyprus problem, in the drillings in the Mediterranean. There are a lot of dangers that they are there. And the country that lost the respect of the European institutions and European member states or the international community, it's not in a position to protect its own interests.
Let's go back, if we may, to the passports, because I read last week, I think, that between October the 13th, when the Cabinet decided to scrap the Golden Passport programme, and November the 1st, when it officially ended, 416 citizen applications were received.
Let me tell you something. It is really a very, very problematic situation, because we had the information on the 23rd of October. The minister tweeted that we received only 6 applications. In our calculations, they received 827, which is applications, together with the families of the applicants. So we counted 827. He came out to contradict this number, but what is amazing, one of the things that we calculated is that, according to the minister's numbers, is that before 30th of September, we had 586 applications, and the dependent people were only 411. So less 1-to-1, dependents. After the end of the program, we have, let's say, another 105 applications, which we disagree totally with this number. But these guys, they have 3 dependents each. 3 dependents. So what happened? And before the announcement of the ending of the program, each applicant usually has 1 dependent. And with the announcement of the ending of the program, each applicant now has 3 dependents. This is something that somebody has to give an explanation. They try to cook the numbers. This is what we are saying. We are saying that the numbers are clean, are not correct, and we are trying to say that by keeping everything, all the information to themselves, they encourage us to really believe that there is something very, very wrong. And we believe that they are very, very, very dirty passports, and they are afraid to give the information to the media, to the Auditor General, that we are demanding that all the files are handed to the Auditor General. And let's talk about how they go on to examine the thing. We are examining now the decisions of the ministerial council, okay, for the last years, how they took these decisions to give passports to these people. And amazingly, the two people who are responsible to nominate the people who are going to investigate are the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General. But these people were, both of them, ministers of this council that we all now to investigate.
So they were on the cabinet that decided to allow these passports, and they're now tasked with investigating, which is just another thing that we've seen in many other areas of life, I think, in Cyprus over the years. What are your next moves, Alexandra?
Well, our next move now is, that we were invited to go to the presidential palace for a meeting with the president, and we refused because we think that 2 months from September, because this started end of August, the first Al Jazeera reportage started early September. Until November, we've seen really nothing except that we are ending the program, but we are going to start another one. And in the meantime, we received 827 more applications. So for us, this is not handling, this is not ending corruption, this is not targeting corruption, this is just finding another way to go on with our usual practices.
Alexandra, the President did have a meeting with some NGOs and other people and groups calling for oversight.
We want to know the NGOs because actually we saw 4 or 5 people and we heard a number of organizations. 2 of those people, they belong to the same organization, and actually one of their actions was portrayed as another organization, which shows that this is a media trick. This is something that the presidency is organizing to show that they are dealing with the thing, but actually it's a misleading action, and we thought it was going to be like that. They were going to use us to say that they are handling the issue while they are not doing anything in substance. What we asked from them, and we delivered as a request on our Friday demonstration, is that everybody who is involved with this program, they should be punished. When we say punished, investigated criminally and punished. We want everybody who was involved to resign or get fired, because we think that they have tarnished the name of Cyprus and they have affected the interest of Cyprus. We want everybody who is in government now and their offices, legal offices, or companies, or associated persons' legal offices are involved in this program to resign.
We have to wrap this up, Alexandra, but from what you were saying a few moments ago about the meetings for the media and so on, we're talking, aren't we, about pinkwashing at the presidential palace, basically?
Yes, this is what we believe. That's why we didn't attend. We don't see any really serious intention on the part of the government, first, to stop this program that has destroyed the environment of Cyprus. It destroyed the environment of Cyprus because it allowed big buildings and an abundance of villas to be built on all beaches of Cyprus, destroying the natural beauty of Cyprus at the expense, of course, always of the people of Cyprus. And the corruption in the construction and the environmental...
The environmental impacts are not done, and we've built on so many Natura 2000 sites and so on. It's going on all the time.
The European Union is taking measures against us, and we are going to pay fine because this program has bred corruption in all sectors.
Right, we have to leave it there, Alexandra, because we're right out of time. Thank you very much for joining us, and I'm assuming the demonstrations will continue, on a weekly basis?
We are trying to organize ourselves with the expanded community now. We are trying to bring more and more organizations in so that we can continue our demonstrations until the issue is tackled in the way that we believe is correct.
Right, that's Alexandra Adalidis from the End Corruption platform. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.